Hey, welcome everybody. I am recording this. I really appreciate you spending your afternoon with Ed and myself to talk about participating in America's Seed Fund, specifically with the DoD programs. My name is Ann Peterson. I am the program director of the Montana Innovation Partnership. We are the Montana's FAST program, and FAST stands for Federal and State Technology Partnership Program. It's a program, really a cooperative agreement between the U.S. Small Business Administration and Montana State University, with additional funding from our Montana Department of Commerce to really provide early stage support for early stage tech companies who are looking to or want to learn more about and competitively participate in the SBIR and STTR programs. We focus a lot on those types of areas that are specific to a lot of the industries that we're seeing in Montana. Obviously, DoD is one of the biggest agencies, is certainly one of those areas. So we'll talk a little bit more. We're going to deep dive into that today, but let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, everybody. It is a small group. It always has been a small group. So we welcome interactive conversation with this. Again, I want to just give you a little bit of a background on what this is, why we're doing this. Again, our mandate is really outreach, technical and business assistance, and financial assistance to those clients that we serve. But if you are not joining us from Montana or you're not affiliated with Montana, there is a FAST organization probably in your state or territory. So I invite you to take a look at SBIR.gov, go to their community tab, and you'll be able to locate services in your state that can help you with SBIR programs. In fact, I think there's a few of our partners in other states here on this webinar as well. I mentioned we're funded by the SBA as well as Montana Department of Commerce and Montana State University, but I'm also based at MSU's TechLink Center. TechLink is the Department of Defense's and VA's national partnership intermediary. That means they help broker technology transfer agreements between technologies that are developed in DoD labs and the private sector. So I invite you also to take a look at techlinkcenter.org if you are looking to add technologies to your portfolio. It's a great way to build those relationships, possibly with the labs, but also really add important technologies that may meet defense stakeholder needs as well. But they just need further development. I'm going to turn it over to you, Ed, or introduce you. I am so happy to have Ed as one of the consultants that helps me to support our Montana clients. He has been with me since I started over this program, really back in 2018. I first met him, and really actively supporting Montana clients in 2019 and to current. So, Ed, welcome. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Ann. Just to give you a little bit of my background, by degree, I'm a mechanical engineer. Spent a lot of my career doing engineering-related software, so a lot of analysis, simulation, visualization software. I've been more in business development, marketing, and sales for the last 20 plus years, and I've been working with the SBIR program either in a company or as a consultant since 2005. So got pretty broad exposure across a number of agencies, but probably do more with DoD, NASA, and Department of Energy these days. So.
Thanks, Ed. So you guys are in good hands. Actually, I think this agenda is a little out, not quite as complete as possible. But folks, what we're going to do is, not sure exactly where everybody is in terms of their experience with the SBIR programs in general. So definitely feel free to hit me up in the chat. Let me know some things. But what we'll do today to kick off the day is do kind of a rapid fire SBIR 101 to give us a level set. So we're making sure that we have kind of all the same semantics and conversations about this. It will be filtered from a DoD standpoint. Then we're definitely going to dig into identifying topics, looking at things right now, and we'll look at the current open active opportunities. I'll say active opportunities. We'll talk about semantics as well, what open means. We're going to look at some of these things, but what's great right now, great timing now, is that we're poised before kind of the, some of these other topics get dropped to help you prepare as strongly as possible. And then what we'll dig into are looking at the components of proposals for DoD topics, and they're going to be different. And then also identifying kind of how you can start taking the steps to make sure that you are getting traction with the Department of Defense. So cover a lot of different things right now. So it's kind of a hybrid webinar and proposal lab here in one. So, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and Ed, and I'm going to kick, and I can let you load up these slides so you can drive on your own later on, or I can keep driving the slides too. So we'll just do things that way. But here, let's get into the SBIR 101. These programs were started back in the 80s. It actually was originally a pilot project from the National Science Foundation. But it became really part of the SBIR policy directive was initially put into law, authorized 1982, I believe it was. And then in 1992, the STTR program was kind of added into that. We'll talk a little bit about the differences between SBIR and STTR here, but it really is the largest source of small business funding for research and development in the nation. So in terms of competing peer-to-peer, you're competing against other small businesses for this type of R&D funding. Some of the most incredible technologies have come out of SBIR. Every single day, we're leveraging, and even DoD technology, we're leveraging technologies that were developed in part or in whole with the SBIR programs. Wi-Fi on a chip, everybody's cell phone has technology that was developed with SBIR funding. So many other great examples. Over 4,000 companies a year are funded in current years. The last year, over $4.6 billion were invested in companies just like yours. And it was invested without taking any equity. So this is non-dilutive funding. And certainly one of the tenets of our program, the FAST program, is to ensure that we're really diversifying and bringing more people into participating in this great program, the SBIR and STTR programs. Again, as I mentioned, on the one hand, it's great for you. It's great to fund your technology development, but it also serves a greater need to address the missions of our agencies, help broader societal impact by these technologies that may result out of this initial seed funding. Definitely want to make sure that people are hearing this message of, if you are underrepresented or underestimated, this is an incredible program for you because your ideas are important and there's a lot of support out there to help you be successful as a company and an entity and get your technology ideas into the market space. That's part of our program. So if you are here, smart, good job. You're making a really good choice to seek some of this or consider some of this non-dilutive funding. One of the things about even just participating in the SBIR programs is first, the fact that it is non-dilutive. There's no equity stake. The government does not take equity into your in your company, but it's an important step or source of funding to just get that initial traction before VCs would even be interested in even talking to you. One of the things that we've found just going through this process, because these technical proposals require you to be very clear and well-defined, it also gives you great clarity on what your true product development strategies should be, and some of your initial go-to-market strategies, because you have to articulate that in these technical proposals. So that's kind of a plus. I don't say that you should do this just for an exercise, but that certainly is one area that you're not going to lose. It's sort of a win-win in this case. It also de-risks you for later investment if you so choose to take outside investment equity funding, as many companies may need in order to scale. grow as organically as possible. But once you are ready to take other funding, if you so choose, having that backing of that the Department of Defense has invested possibly hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into your technology development, and you've established traction in the commercial market, whether that's a DoD stakeholder or the civilian market space, that goes a long way to kind of proving your concept for VC investors or others. And these last 2 points are really interrelated. By participating in the SBIR program, just at phase 1, receiving the first phase 1 award, you have what are called SBIR data rights. To the extent practicable, as long as you mark things and do everything appropriately to protect that data that is developed with the SBIR funding, and that's a whole other webinar. We can talk more offline about those aspects. You have certain types of non-disclosure intellectual property protections for 20 years. What that also does is set you up for direct follow-on phase 3 contracts. And especially when we're talking about the DoD, that is something you should be thinking about. You have the potential, as long as you are making your relationships with your defense stakeholders, to assert SBIR data rights and help get into sole source contracting later on. It's not a given. I'm just gonna say that there. It's not automatic. You can't just say, well, hey, I got a phase 1 or phase 2, you should give me this contract. It will be to the extent practicable. And you still have to make those relationships. Any other thoughts on that, Ed? Those are, it's easy
No,
to say. Go ahead.
It does kind of tie into, if you are going to go for future investment, I mean, the fact that you do kind of have that sole source ability with the federal government, and just because it's a DoD contract doesn't mean you can only sell to the DoD sole source. You can sell any part of the federal government sole source. And sometimes that's a big deal for investors. So there are definite benefits that you can emphasize from your SBIR success with external investors if that's the route you're going to take. Absolutely.
And it is still the case that if another company acquires you and your technology, that those data rights do transfer. I've heard hemming and hawing about maybe that changing, but currently that still is, if you are acquired, the data rights will transfer again for that up to that 20 years. I went backwards here. Funding areas, and we'll kind of go over this because we're going to dig deeper into the DoD technology areas a little bit later. But really across the board, all of the agencies that participate in the SBIR program are looking for pretty much anything under the sky that can address unmet needs if there's something related to technology development, ag tech, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, quantum information science, photonics, any of the life sciences as well. You'd be surprised how much life science investing DoD does as well. So try not to self-select out. Definitely explore multiple agencies for your technology. And speaking of those multiple agencies, here are all of the agencies that actually currently participate in the SBIR and STTR programs. And we'll talk again, I'll do a quick little overview of what's the differences between SBIR and STTR. But this on the left-hand side here are all of the agencies, a little logo slide, that have both SBIR and STTR programs. These are agencies that have extramural research and development budgets of over $100 million annually. So they have both of these programs, these sister programs. On the right-hand side of this slide are the agencies that only have SBIR programs. But as you can see, Department of Defense, Health and Human Services and NIH, Energy, NASA, USDA, and the National Science Foundation have both SBIR, STTR programs, and the rest of them here on the right-hand side: Education, EPA, Transportation, Homeland Security, NOAA, and NIST. I want to, again, level set here. Let's talk about who's eligible for this. Let's talk about what is innovation, and then how your proposals are really going to be evaluated. As this applies not just for DoD, but almost every single agency. This is how they'll these are the types of things that they look for. Obviously, just to be eligible, you have to be a US-based small business, majority US owned, and you have to be a for-profit entity. So you can be a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, a co-op, again, as long as you are organized and your entity is a for-profit organization. You have to have under 500 employees, and that includes all of your affiliates, whether it's a parent company or subsidiaries. So most of the companies that I work with are just your standard small businesses. I have a link in this to kind of the official eligibility guidelines. So if any of you have VC backing, things like that, there are some additional explanations of how VC-backed companies can be organized in order to still be eligible for SBIR. Another element, kind of a little added to this, is your company's, at least the focus for purposes of SBIR, should be on research and development. It's to fund research and development. It's not to acquire capital equipment. It's not to acquire your building. That's not how you can use this SBIR funding. So that really is another element of what your company should be like. There should be a good portion of what you're doing is research focused. Innovation, and this is straight out of the policy directive. I just kind of cut and pasted, formatted a little bit differently. What is innovation? This is how they define it. It has to be something that's new or improved. It has to be something that has the potential to form the basis of a pretty strong commercial product, if successful. It does have to include something that's new development, new technology development, and that can include taking current technologies, commercial off-the-shelf types of technologies, but repackaging them in a new and novel way to address a certain unmet need that's in the market space. But in general, depending on the agency, you really have to make sure that you're looking at something new. We're not talking about things that are already in the marketplace. So like incremental research is not, incremental improvements is not what we're looking for here. And again, so new applications of existing technologies. And then third here is really the three general buckets of how you are going to be evaluated. And again, I mentioned this is across the board. Every agency has some form of this, and we'll advise you to look at how do they spell out their rubric for evaluation criteria. But they will fall into these three buckets. They're going to be looking at the intellectual merits of your proposed statement of work. Is it sound? Do you have sound strategies? Or novel technology development is going to require that you have a very sound scientific method, clear tasks, clear milestones, etc. They're also going to be looking at the impact, both broader mission impact, the importance of how this will help in the case of DoD, how this is going to help protect the warfighter, advance the DoD missions, but also that there's a potential for this to make sure that you have an economic impact as well, that it can support a commercial product line for your company. And then the third kind of bucket that they're going to be assessing you on, just like any investor, is your company and team. They want to know that your company is, or that your team has what it takes to competently and effectively execute on what your proposed work is, but also get some traction. Make sure that you have the capabilities within your team to make sure that you can enter the marketplace. And especially in this case with DoD, you're going to have a special set of skills to make sure that you can penetrate that market space. Here are the three phases. Again, 3 phases of SBIR and STTR. And only the first 2 are really SBIR funding. Phase 1, and when we're talking about mission-driven agencies like the Department of Defense and NASA, this really is that proof of concept, that discovery. You want to make sure that you are finding your right stakeholders in this process. But this is really proving out that what you think can happen can work, those technical objectives are truly feasible. And you will provide that validation that what you propose will actually work. So this is a feasibility study, anywhere from 3 to 12 months, maybe longer, depending on the agency. And again, different values. I think, we're going to be looking in the roughly 200 range of direct cost, 200K for direct costs for 6 months worth of work. And again, we'll look at that different cases of how much is funded and a little bit later. But if you're successful with phase 1, you can apply, you can submit a proposal for phase 2 funding. That's really where your technical development will happen. That's where the majority of the product development should probably happen. And the aim for that is that you have kind of a proof of or a prototype at the end of that, hopefully, right? There, with exceptions, there are different agencies, but for DoD, they also offer direct to phase 2 options. We'll talk a little bit about what direct to phase 2s are, supplemental phase 2 options, and then Air Force has kind of big bets that still counts as a flavor of SBIR money. But any of those supplemental types of funding beyond just the first phase 1 and first phase 2, they may require some additional matching. And that's a big thing with the StratFi and TACFi funding. So those are types of flavors of SBIR funding. And then phase 3 really is not SBIR money. It just means that you have commercialized this. You've gotten transition to one of the DoD programs. You've been able to secure other outside investment or other types of funding that is not SBIR flavor. So again, and I'm gonna look at a couple of these things too. Again, some of you may know all of this, but it's worth reminding folks that there is a difference between a grant and a contract, and the Department of Defense SBIR and STTR programs are contracts. They really are a procurement vehicle, and it comes with really different types of things that you need to be considering. One of the biggest issues or things to consider with a contracting agency like the Department of Defense is that there are only certain times within the year that you actually can talk to technical points of contacts related to a certain topic. And that's during this pre-release period. So there's some topics right now, and we'll look at them today, where you can freely have a one-on-one conversation with a technical point of contact. Once the solicitation is considered open, meaning people can submit, they cannot have one-on-one private conversations. Every question has to be posted publicly. And you can maybe imagine the differences between that. A one-on-one private conversation, I can be a little bit more free about how I'm thinking about approaching solving their problem. I may not want to post my secret sauce in posting a question publicly, but that is an option. There's also, some of the payment schedules could be different. Talk maybe a little bit about that too. And I'm going to say you've heard of open topics, meaning where they're sort of investigator initiated, but I'm going to still bring that back to, there is a constraint on the statement of work. These are mission goals. You need to be thinking of your DoD as your end customer, even if they talk about dual use. When you're writing this proposal, your first customer should be the DoD. So you really want to make sure that you're crafting and discussing your project scope with respect to what they are looking for. Granting agencies, I'm not going to talk too much about them right now. Investigator initiated, National Science Foundation, NIH. Just wanted to emphasize kind of the difference between the two, and that DoD is a contracting agency. This slide, I'll go real quickly. I've talked about SBIR, STTR. What's the difference? Aside from the different times that they got instituted or put into our reauthorization, SBIR allows you to have the participation of a research institution as a subcontractor. A university like Montana State University or the University of Montana, or a federal lab, one of the Army Research Labs or AFRL, or any one of the DoD labs, if you might be partnering with them, could be a sub-awardee to an SBIR contract. STTR requires that you have a research institution involved in this. And the whole intent was that we're trying to take technology that was in a university or out of a lab and actually really transition it to the commercial market space. And you might require more of that inventor's participation, but they're not going to join your company. But it allows you to have different levels of funding that you're allowed to subcontract. So that's the biggest difference between SBIR and STTR. So for the most part, all of the other rules apply, and we will. I just wanted to make sure that you had kind of that overview. Definitely make sure that you if there's any questions that come up, guys, that you post them in the chat as well. And you know, I'm going to get this over to Ed here. We'll probably go back and forth a little bit more. But just a note on direct to phase 2. I mentioned that as an option. Some of you have seen those topics, I'm sure, and STTRs. Direct to phase 2, you need to have already established feasibility, right? That makes sense, right? Phase 1 is feasibility. If you're going to phase 2, you know, I've proven that. But you have to have that documented. You can't just say, oh yeah, I've already proved it's feasible. You have to demonstrate that that is actually feasible and have that recorded in an effective way to submit that. And it'll be asked in the direct to phase 2 proposal. Again, thinking of STTR as transitioning a kind of newer basic science out from a university or a federal lab, there are no direct to phase 2 STTRs. They're expecting that the first outside funding for STTRs is still kind of a commercial or a technical feasibility. So no, you won't find an STTR for a direct to phase 2. STTR requires the participation of a research institution. We've already talked about that. And then also think about that, that if your component or if your technology is going to be part of one of these larger systems, aircraft, you know, bigger programs, electro-optical materials type of things, probably expect that you should also be finding not just the DoD program, but which systems integrator is it Lockheed Martin or Boeing or BAE or something like that? Which systems integrator is participating or leading some of those acquisitions, because they actually may be a really key partner of yours. What do you think, Ed? Any other thoughts on those concepts? Or
Yeah, just to give you a tangible example, if you develop antennas, there's a company, I happen to be based in Boulder, Colorado. There's a company here that makes antennas. But in general, the DoD doesn't buy antennas, they buy communication systems. So that company probably has to partner with someone like an L3Harris that makes the radios and other parts of the system so that they become a part of an overall system as opposed to an individual component that isn't necessarily on the DoD shopping list.
right. Yeah, exactly. And I can advance slides, but why don't I let you talk a little bit more about some of these? You know, we'll talk.
Yeah, one of the things that's very important, I didn't mention, one of the other roles is I actually score commercialization plans for the Department of Energy. And one of the things that I always look for is, have they done customer discovery? Have they talked to their customer? Do they know who it is? Have they validated there's a need? And do they understand things like how to buy? So we just did the example of, you know, the antennas and versus communication systems. So having a good understanding of who your customer is, you probably want to get maybe a letter of support from that potential customer to support your phase 1. What I always suggest, if it's feasible, is when you start talking about phase 2, try to get a pilot project with your eventual customer as part of your phase 2 execution plan. So usually in the second year, when you're closer to being done with that prototype, to actually get it out and field tested in an operational environment. So all those things kind of require that you've had these discussions, not just at a point of time, but it's a continuum where you're getting requirements, you're building things to their spec, you're getting feedback, and hopefully you're going to actually get someone to do a beta test or field trial or a pilot project or whatever the appropriate terminology is.
kind of implicit in that is understanding, are you actually really addressing the problem that they have?
And
This is
the
a
other thing you have to realize is when you do SBIR stuff, you get a contract from Air Force Research Lab or Army Research Lab or Naval Research Lab or some entity. Those entities typically are not the warfighters. They have a task from the warfighter to find a technology, but you need to find an operational command. So, I did a couple projects with terrestrial weather for the Air Force. Well, that means at some point, someone in the 557th Weather Wing needs to want your technology. Or if you're creating something that a soldier is gonna carry, you're probably gonna be, sometime you're gonna have to talk to the US Army Natick Lab, because that's where a lot of that technology gets sourced out of. If you're doing things for naval helicopter pilots, at some point you're gonna go to Naval Air Station Pensacola to try and get somebody to use it. So trying to figure out not just who your customer is, but where they're located so that you can start to do some things to find people at those sites and make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, this is in the slide deck. I'll go quickly over this. These registrations are required. So if I want to encourage you, make sure that you start early. I have a link to a little reminder infographic that you guys can use for yourself to remind you of those, and also the both the registrations that are required to accept and receive and submit federal funding or accept awards from the federal government through the System for Award Management, as well as SBC Control ID, which is something that you get from SBIR.gov and registering with the SBA, but also all of the specific submission portals that each of the other agencies have. This little sheet has that as well, but we're going to dig into what DoD does as well.
Yeah, a big thing there, and a company asked me this question just last week. It's a complicated process, but there is help, and you don't have to pay for that help. So they used to be called PTACs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Now they're called Apex Accelerators. There's one in every state, and that is a resource for you that you can use free of charge to help you through these registrations to make sure that everything's consistent and talks to each other and you get the right IDs, so that when you go to submit your proposal, that all that stuff's taken care of. Because some of these things, like SAM.gov is the big one, the System for Award Management. And if everything goes really well, it still takes a week or two if you make a mistake. And by mistake, I mean, like if in the SBA world, your company, comma, Inc., and in that one, your company, Inc., and the comma's not there. If they don't match, those systems talk to each other.
Yeah.
So fixing the mistakes adds to those 2 to 3 weeks. So get on top of the registrations early, get the help that's available for free. You don't have to pay someone to help you do this right. They realize it's complicated and there is a resource for you.
Yeah, my Apex Accelerator partners here in Montana we are bouncing people back and forth all the time, and we're really, working collectively, collaboratively to make sure that these companies are successful. And they're brilliant at this. So definitely take advantage of it. I put the National Apex Accelerator URL there. So if you have not already tapped into yours, do so. They can make sure that all of these things are in line. And I've had, not with DoD, but I have unfortunately had companies who were not able to submit to NIH because of what Ed just said, where their SAM registration did not match with their grants.gov and their, ERA Commons or whatever, the other portals, that they weren't the same. It was the same entity, but they didn't match, and they weren't able to actually submit their final proposal. They had to wait till the next window. It was terrible. It's an awful experience for them. So make sure those are all in line. I'm gonna let you lead with this.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the emphasis of this is how do you find topics? Well, the first thing is there are things that you're good at. When you founded your company, it's like, this is what I want to do. This is our core competency. This is what we live and breathe. So try and find alignment with those types of topics to figure out what agencies fund that, whether it's within DoD or whether you're going to, maybe you have a space technologist, you're also going to look at NASA or NOAA or something like that. You can go to SBIR.gov and you can see what's been funded previously. So that gives you an idea of what agencies look for. You can look at old solicitations, previous solicitations. A lot of times topics, particularly like NASA, tends to have topics that live for maybe 3 proposal cycles. So if they wanted it last year, there's a good chance they may want it again this year. Same with DoD. Sometimes things live multiple years. But always match your core competencies. And I see people who, it's like, gee, we could kind of do this. Maybe we should chase this one. If it's really not in your product roadmap, it's an opportunity cost. And it's a 3-year opportunity cost. From the time you write your phase 1 proposal to the time you spend out your phase 2 is about 3 years. So even though it's money, I mean, green money that spends is sometimes what companies need. If it's going to divert you from eventually, it slows down your time to market for the product you really want to build, it's probably not a good idea to go after those kinds of topics. So this is one that, well, why DoD? So if you look at all the money that exists in the SBIR program, which is the one that's in the lower left, you can see almost half the money is DoD funding. And it's the formula is it's like 3.2% of whatever your external R&D budget is. So,
Right.
So DoD has the largest external R&D budget. Same thing, you can see that they dominate the STTR program. But as Ann said, it's more than, they buy more than guns. They buy satellite imagery, but they buy stuff like, there was a topic about 5 years ago for high-test dog food for military working dogs. There's stuff that, we'll see it in one of the future slides, but there's other entities within DoD aside from just the 3 branches of the military. So they actually do a very diverse set of things. So, Ann had mentioned health topics. Well, the Defense Health Agency is one that, they worry about things like the health of their soldiers. They worry about things like traumatic brain injuries. They worry about different, psychological readiness metrics. Some things go across the entire DoD, so they might come out of the Office of Secretary of Defense. Special Operations Command may have some needs that are more more specialized for those units. Missile Defense Agency is just what it sounds like. Because there's a lot of microelectronics in military hardware, they actually have an entity that does that. DARPA is kind of more of a researchy part. The internet came out of DARPA. It used to be called DARPANet back in the 70s. So, there are some interesting things. That wasn't an SBIR technology, but, that's the kind of stuff DARPA does. It's like, here's something that we need, and sometimes it moves on and has general applicability in the commercial sector. And the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is all the 3-letter agencies. That's all the spy spook kind of stuff. So a lot of satellite imagery and cybersecurity and cryptography and a lot of things like that. Across a lot of these, there's a lot of software. There's a lot of high performance computing. So there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily think of the military wanting, but it supports their mission just like it supports, the commercial economy.
Right, absolutely. And speaking of, what are the types of things? It's again across the board. I mean, there's biotechnology, there's quantum science, there's space technologies. I didn't have Space Force or the Space Development Agency on there on that last slide, but they're kind of managed through the Air Force. But so many different technologies that the DoD looks for. So and we'll say, Ed, while they have all of these different areas, I would suggest people, if you do not want or do not want to spend time making the DoD be your customer in some form, then find another agency. The National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, or other agencies would probably be a better fit. I do, one of the best things to do when if you're pursuing SBIR for DoD is that's because you want them to be one of, part of your market space. There are others that can do this. And we're gonna start digging into looking at topics, digging in, kind of dissecting what the topic is. But maybe me as a entrepreneurial support person here. We're coaching. I cannot replace you actually reading the instructions. What we do, and other FAST teams probably can assert, people who are our partners here as well, is that we're going to coach you through this. We can help Sherpa you through this process and navigate it for you, but we don't do the writing for you, but we can do kind of heavy reviews, heavy editing when your proposals are ready. That's how those are one of the, that coaching and then those proposal reviews are really the key elements of helping you to put forth your most competitive proposal. But we're also here to teach you how to fish, right? I love it when I have clients who have helped a couple of times, and then I hear from them later, like, "Hey, Ann, I just submitted 2 direct to phase 2s and this and that." And I'm like, they didn't even call me. They know how to do it now. So this is something that you can learn how to do, but make sure that you read the current instructions. We mentioned about, gosh, if something's not open now, go ahead and take a look. Past solicitations are available for you to look at, but always make sure they change often every time. So make sure you have the current instructions bookmarked.
And they're changing right now because we just started, so that the government fiscal year starts October 1st. So we're actually looking at topics in fiscal year 25. So any of those, oh, let's do it different next year, those changes are kicking in. So even if you did it last year, read carefully, because sometimes things change within the different agencies.
Exactly. But it doesn't hurt to get started here. So we're gonna take a look again. Let's look at finding these topics, right? So we're gonna show you kind of looking at the funding announcement, reviewing the topics and how you want to, the information that's in a topic description, and then what some of your next steps are going to be. So I'll go ahead and I'll advance slides for you, Ed, but I'll definitely let you go ahead and lead here.
Yeah, and also realize that the things that are in yellow, those are live links. So in your PDF, you can actually click on those links and they will take you to hopefully the pertinent part of the website that.
Yeah, and if you want to also, like, for some of these live, I can do it, or if you want to take over and go to them too, we can.
We'll just have you do it, and I don't think we need to do them on that page because we're going to go into it in a deeper dive in a couple slides. So, but the things to always pull out of when you're looking at a topic, there's a lot of details there. And so the way DoD tends to do things is they pre-release topics. So you can look at things, and that period is usually about 30 days. And then they open the topic. Now you can start submitting proposals. And then 30 days later, it closes. So from the time you first read it to when you submit, you've got 60 days. But the important part about that first 30 days, when they're just pre-release topics, is listed with the topic is the technical point of contact. And you can have a one-on-one conversation with them. And we'll show you an example of that. But once they open it, all that TPOC information disappears, and you can only ask questions in an open forum. And if there's something that you consider proprietary that you've got a question about, you don't want to ask it in an open forum. The other thing I tell people is read that open forum, because one of your competitors that's going and writing a proposal may ask a question you didn't think about, or there may be an answer that clarifies a question that you have. So try to stay up on those as you're working on things, but always try and have a conversation with your TPOC. Just it lets them know who you are and that you're coming. Sometimes it gives you clarifying information, like they may say, "We like your technology. These are the aspects we wish you would stress." They actually sometimes give you that level of detail. So that conversation can be invaluable. They also list references. the absolute funniest experience I ever had. It was a robotics topic from the Army. I was looking at the references, and it actually referenced a company I knew. It was the guy's PhD thesis that was referenced. So I'm like, Tim, you should probably look at this. This may be one you want to submit for. So you're probably not going to be that lucky, but strange coincidence like that does happen. They try to tell you what document you're going to need to write your proposal, but usually the way things are is if it's an Army topic, anything for the Army is supersedes any other information. If it's not described, then you go back to the main DoD solicitation and say, okay, because the Army didn't give me specific instructions, it defaults to the DoD instruction. So knowing the precedence of your documents is important. We talked about the pre-release and open periods. When are proposals due? They're due on the due date. It's usually noon Eastern time, not your local time, Eastern time. So most of us are in Mountain time. That means 10 a.m. So it's not 10:01. You're better off not waiting till 9:59. So, but realize that sometimes it's a date and a time and a time zone. Budget caps are usually written in the topic. Sometimes they're written in the general solicitation. Do not exceed the budget cap. They won't even read your proposal. They'll just say you're non-compliant. So,
and guys, we can have the same solicitation and different topics for DoD can have completely different time periods of performance and budget caps. So that's, again, reading the instructions is really important.
Yeah, typically a phase 1 is 6 months, sometimes 9 months, sometimes 12 months. Some have an option period to bridge you between phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2s tend to be 24 months. Sometimes I've seen 18 months. So you have to know that, because that's when you build out your deliverables and your timelines and your budget, you have to take all that into account. And they will throw you out if you don't format it. So if it says 1-inch margins, don't cheat and say, I'm going to make them 3/4-inch margins so I can squeeze more in. They'll throw you out. If they want page numbers, you better put page numbers. Yeah. The really key thing is each section, they tend to give you a description of what content, what questions they expect you to answer. If you don't answer the question, or if you don't answer it where they're expecting the answer, I mentioned I'm a reviewer. When I review, sometimes I'm reviewing 40 proposals. Do not make your reviewer unhappy by not putting stuff in there or not putting it where it's supposed to be. If it seems you're being redundant, it's being consistent, because like when I score commercialization plans, I don't have to read the technical proposal. So don't say, well, I already answered that, because a lot of agencies use split review teams like that. So always provide what they want, where they want it.
Right, exactly. And we'll, yeah, we will show you some examples of this a little bit later on here when we kind of dig into these specifics.
Yeah.
This, folks, one thing they're doing this year, which I love, so they used to only have 3 cycles per year. Then they started having a few, like DARPA and Air Force started doing these out of cycle or ad hoc types of topics. They'd release something outside. And then they opened up an annual announcement so that topics could be posted and there would be instructions attached to them. Now this year, they have a little bit more regularity. We don't have to wait and see, like, I wonder if something's going to come out or be watching it all the time. They have an annual BAA, as well as the 3 cyclic or 3 standard BAAs that will come out 3 times a year. But the annual BAA topics will be posted the first Wednesday of the month, I understand right now. So at least, we know that we can kind of check, we can be paying attention a little bit more and hopefully not miss something that could be a good fit for us.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say relative to this schedule is going back to the historical when they did 3 times a year. The first one of the fiscal year, so this year it's SBIR 25.1, STTR 25.A, usually have a lot more topics across a lot more agencies than you would see in some of the later ones, and certainly in the out-of-cycle ones. So there could be a very big opportunity that gets published on December 4th.
Yep. Yeah. So watch this. Currently, we'll see when we go in live, there's like 22 or so topics currently active. Come the week after Thanksgiving, there's probably going to be 200 or so, I would suspect.
Yeah, I mean, the Navy, oftentimes in the first round, there'll be 80 topics from the Navy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
So,
So this is, and then those will be due in February. And then these other ones similarly, the due dates, these are interesting because these releases are, I guess from pre-release to when they're due. So that looks like about 6 weeks or so, maybe close to 8 weeks, possibly.
yeah, I think Thanksgiving
Shorter
broke
amount of time.
that cycle, but in
Yeah.
general, it's about, it's 3 to 4 weeks in each part of the process. The other
Yeah.
thing I'll say, notice the pre-release date is December 4th for that big cycle, and
Mhm.
the open date is January 8th. Well, you probably realize the Christmas holiday is about half of that period. So
Yeah.
read the solicitation early, ask your questions early.
Yeah. Before the 16th, definitely before the 20th, but try to get on top of this right away and reach out to that technical point of contact as soon as possible, once you have valid, and we'll talk more about talking to the technical point of contact a little bit later too. So here, this little glasses mean, let's go ahead and go live. This is, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to escape out of this here. Let me do that. I'll push this over here. And let me bring this back over here. I have something I was going to share. Give me a second. Sorry, guys. Oops, what did I just do? I just closed my, accidentally, because this little floating Zoom thing is on my thing. So I'll have to reload all my pages. That's okay. I can do that. Let's go to DSIP here. DSIP means the Defense SBIR STTR portal. And guys, thank you. I appreciate your patience with me as I'm trying to get around this. That's that one. This is the main DoD site. And I'm going to go, what I'd like to go, and we can talk about that a little bit here too. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and talk a little bit about sites here before we dig into that specific, kind of looking at how we identify topics or find information about that. This is the main Department of Defense, where they have a lot of information about the SBIR programs overall at the Department of Defense, and there's some good information. They are starting to publish and put some more things into this. I used to just like, okay, I don't worry about that. I am going to say, if you are interested, for example, in Army, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, Army SBIR. Let me spell Army right. As an example, if the Army's if you find a topic that is an Army-related SBIR or STTR topic, I'm going to actually say, take a look at their website. Each of those components have their own SBIR little sub-websites as well. And you really want to kind of look at some of the nuances that are there with that specific component or service. Army, Navy, and Air Force, and we might look at all of those here today. They also are going to give you a lot of information about other things that can help you participate in the Army's SBIR program, competitions or other opportunities, mentor protege or other industry days. I really encourage you to take advantage of some of those. We are going to talk about SBIR and STTR, but again, that's another benefit for coming to visit some of those.
Okay. Before you leave that page,
Yeah.
two things. One is, notice there's a LinkedIn badge up there. I follow the different agencies on LinkedIn. The other thing is, somewhere there's probably where you can sign up for a newsletter. It's usually towards the bottom of the page. Get on their mailing list, because sometimes things change, or there is an out of cycle thing, or there's an event that supports SBIR, and those things will typically get blasted to their email list. So, you can set up a filter so those things always go to a folder so you don't clog up your inbox, whatever you want. But it particularly previous, when they just released things kind of, I will use the term willy-nilly. That was the only way you knew what was going on, is if you were signed up on their email list.
Exactly, exactly. And in fact, I think I have, and if I haven't already, I'm going to tell you, I've shared a Google Drive that you guys should be able to access. Anybody can access it. You can't edit, you can view and download. So I have some additional resources in there. I'll make sure we compile a list of all of the agencies' email sign up lists. Now that was like for the main DoD one, but again, yeah, find Army specific one and things like that. They'll have that. That's a great way to stay in the loop, in the know. But and I'll let you, I mean, here we go. DSIP listserv right at the bottom of this page. Hopefully you guys can see that here. That's where you'll sign up to be notified of, and they're really good. They're brilliant. When they pop a new topic, I get an email. It shows me what topics are out there. Right now, good time for us to do this. We're waiting. We're getting ready for the December 4th drop. There are not a lot of active topics at the moment. But where do you want to go? Where should we go first?
Why don't we look at the SBIR topics that are out there, those 10 active topics.
Okay. So I went ahead and went to that. I could have linked on that widget that they showed. Here I'm showing these actually shows all 13. Sorry, not just SBI, not just the those 10 topics that just those 10, but there's 13 actually. That so I thought there were 20 some, but it's even reduced since the last time I looked.
Yes. A bunch of them were just due yesterday. So
right, that was it.
So you can kind of see stuff that's out here. What's nice is, as I mentioned, the component instructions, there's a link to them right on the page now.
Right.
And because that was always the question. So that's where the Army instructions come first. And then if the Army instructions don't speak to it, revert back to the main DoD ones. And you can see, the open and close dates. That Q&A that's all the way over to the right, that's that public forum. So that's where you can find out what other people may be asking about topics.
Yep.
The X-Tech topics tend to be, they're more drawn out. There's usually it usually progresses to a pitch event as opposed to a normal proposal. There are some interesting things that happen. That looks like it's an artificial intelligence one.
Yeah. This one is scalable tools for automated or AI risk management and algorithmic analysis, right? So that's, and this is more, the X-Tech competitions are kind of a series of competitions and they post those here as well. So I would invite, we can talk a little bit more about those. Put it in the chat if you want to, if we can kind of come back and talk about that a little bit more later on as well.
Yeah.
But let's close that.
So if you look at this third one down, that large language model topic. So the first thing you see that wasn't on the X-Tech one is there's points of contact. So those are the people that you might think about writing an email that says, your topic is asking for this kind of technology. I have a solution that is based on this type of technology. How responsive is that to the topic? So it's kind of do I really fit here? And you may know you fit, but it's a way to, one, get introduced to the TPOC, and secondly, to maybe get some guidance on things you might emphasize.
Right.
And if we scroll through this, you can see that it's got keywords. So if I was writing a proposal, I'd probably make sure those keywords appeared several places inside my proposal. It tells you what the objectives are, gives you a description. It kind of tells you what the expectation is for phase one, tells you what the budget and the performance period is. Army's pretty good about putting things specific into the topic. Other agencies, less so.
It's kind of,
And as you scroll down, you'll see also what they expect in a phase two, what they think the commercialization is or eventual operational is. And then there's references, places you may want to go and do some background reading to see if, hey, that paper is a lot like what my company does. So those are important things to look at.
Right, right. And we'll go back and folks, I didn't give you this precursor to, and many of you may know this, right? The Department of Defense, back in the last reauthorization, each component or service is required at least one time a year to include what is called open topics. And that was really based off of an experiment that proved successful that the Air Force did, and we'll look at a version of that. This particular one, I chose on purpose. We chose on purpose. It is a classic phase 1 specific topic. And when we say that specific is like, they want a solution for this problem, and they want the solution to kind of address this. Of course, they want your input, your investigator expertise to bring to the solution, but it's really, don't tell them what they want. They know what they want. They want someone who can fulfill that solution, developing the solution for them. And back to kind of what they're looking in the phase 1, they've almost defined your outline for what your statement of work should be in this case, right? An open topic isn't going to have quite that specific of analysis. They've started to kind of put flavors or research areas for open topics, but they're still really looking at, hey, is there something out there that we just don't know about and that we should be aware of? So do take advantage of, these are not just kind of out there to look at the title and then put a proposal in. They're going to give you guidance on what you should be writing in your proposal. Any other thought? And here, SMART. Sometimes, occasionally, and you'll see this probably after this December 4th, you'll see people in the pre-release period posting questions like, silly, don't do that. You should talk to the technical point of contact if you possibly can. But again, there are none here because no one has asked one yet. Good, they shouldn't. But when is it open? When it's after December 4th, you'll start seeing questions be posted on this. You can download the PDF or a document version of this as well, so you can share it with your team members. Also, the one bummer about this system is that I can't just go to this one and then have a URL that takes me right directly to this particular topic. So that's kind of why it's nice to save that. While another nice thing to do to download that version of that PDF or document is, at this point, you'll have John Bland and Christopher Colvit's contact information. Now, just because you have that doesn't mean that you can contact them during the open period, the period of submissions. But they might be nice contacts for you after the solicitation closes for you to follow up with and talk more about it. Technical points of contact, and Ed, you can talk about this more, are typically, and for specific topics, they are involved in the decision-making of what solution gets used. So they're not just administrative people. They are related and aligned with addressing the selection of solutions here. What would, and you have kind of some cooking show screenshots of this in your slide decks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and I'll start the slideshow again so that you guys can see, because this, I want to make sure that, Ed, we wanted to look at maybe a direct to phase 2, or were there any questions about that last, that kind of dissecting with that topic? Don't see any. Make sure you put them in the chat. I don't think I have the Q&A open. I don't see that open. So definitely make sure that you have some questions. I feel like we're talking at you. I want to make sure that we're addressing any questions that you all may have.
Yeah, so
this is the next one, I think.
yeah, direct to phase 2. What the DoD, and it's actually DoD and NIH are the only ones that can do direct to phase 2. What they realize is that through some means you may have matured a technology. You've done it with your own funds. You've done it with investor funds. but you've done the equivalent of that proof of concept stage. And what that means, so the DoD has this concept of a technology readiness level, which is what you're seeing on the right side of this. Typically, when you go into a phase one, you're kind of at TRL 1 or 2. So one is, you're one step beyond the pencil sketch on the bar napkin. You've done a little research, you've thought about this. You may have done some testing in your lab. You've actually done a couple, yeah, this is kind of possible. So maybe you're TRL 2. When you finish a phase one, you're usually at TRL 3, 4, or 5. So you've probably done things in the lab, but you're short of actually getting into an operational environment. So if you've done that level of development with your technology, if the topic allows, or if it's a topic specific to a directed phase 2, you can jump right in here. The advantages of that is you get to the larger pool of money faster. So the phase 1 tends to be like $250,000. A phase 2 is $1 million plus. So you've got more time and more resource to do things. But elements of what you're going to do require that you know who your customer is. And actually, for the Air Force, the AFWERX part of the program, you actually need a letter signed by someone in an operational command saying, if they do this, I'll buy it. So that direct to phase 2 has higher rewards, but it also has a higher hurdle to get over as far as I've got something really tangible here, and you're going to have to document. There's a section where you're going to write, this is what my equivalent of phase 1 research is, and here's my specific customer, not my, I think it's this customer. It's like, this is the customer that is going to buy it, and I've got a letter from them. So it's a good thing to be aware of. This is a truncated, the TRL scale actually goes from 1 to 9. There's a link to it on this site. So if you're not familiar with it, because even when you start to do milestones, when you write your proposal, it's like, when we finish this milestone, we expect to be at TRL. You're gonna have to tie things to this TRL level a lot of times. So being familiar with it is to your benefit. It's good if you have demonstrated traction. That can be with the military, or it can be a commercial product, because if you remember back to the definition of innovation, it can be an existing technology that you're going to create a new application or bring it into a new application space, which may or may not require changes to it. So if you have a consumer or a commercial good that you think that the Army could use, say you've got some brilliant handheld GPS thing that the Army's never thought of, doubtful, but could happen. Those are the kinds of things that they look for. And you're going to write the equivalent of a phase 2 proposal. So we're going to talk about only what goes into a phase 1 in these slides. Phase 2 is kind of the same themes, but where you might be writing a page in a phase 1, you're probably writing 3 pages in a phase 2. So I don't know if there's other things you want to talk about with the direct to phase 2, Ann?
I think that's good. I think I really, we want to, we're wanting to cover this kind of a classic specific one, some of the DoD, and we'll look at some of these as well, folks, that may be currently open here or active. Or I think maybe Ed, you may have had a previous ones. We can talk about that too. I do want to not to scare anybody, but if you do not have traction, don't go the direct to phase 2. Honestly, they very likely will have someone already in mind they're waiting for a solicitation, something that is coming from them, and they've put this out to a competitive bid for companies to apply to. But if they're out there, these technical points of contact, they've started to get it, they're aware of, or there may be someone that has already established some relationship there. They may be expecting. And again, it's really more important. It goes back to also that company and team. Do they believe that you can actually deliver for them? And if you have zero traction with the DoD yet, you haven't proven that you are capable of entering and doing the work to be a defense contractor. So not to poo-poo or have make you sound like it, or make it sound like it's rigged or anything. It's not. But if you're not there yet, try to find something else from at the phase 1 stage, or some other opportunities to start getting that traction.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
this is one of the
solution.
open topics. The Air Force and Space Force call them commercial solutions openings, CSO topics. And what you can see, rather than having specific, and we just did a screen grab of this, and we can go back and look at this one specifically, but you can see this is from last year, it's from fiscal year 24. The 7 means it actually just means it's the CSO topic. That was the way the Air Force chose to designate them.
Can do that. I think that go ahead. I'm so sorry. And here's one that is open from DLA. Do you want me to try that one in, and just so we can?
Well, we'll do that next, because the CSO one, the Air Force ones are different than everybody else. And
They are. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead, open all solicitation, all active. Now,
yeah, if you can find AFX 247.
and there we go, closed, open. I'm going to do this, and then Air Force. Come here. Wait.
Oh, I think you need to check SBIR, STTR. Oh, there you go.
Well, oh well. What was it? What was it? AF.
AFX 247.
Yep.
That's probably enough to make it come up.
I did have it open, guys. Sorry, I did have this open when I closed all
So
my.
if we go and look at this one, this was one they did late. You can see this was due back in October, was the due date. But you can see that they've got technology areas and priorities as opposed to things that are specific. So
Lots of them.
an example that I've seen, so you can see that they've got some AI topics that are in here, advanced computing and software, things like that. So one, it may be that you've got this great artificial intelligence or machine learning technology that you can train to look for things in images. Well, the Air Force looks for things in images. They don't look for, lung spots on an X-ray, but they do look to see, if I look at a terrain map, did something move from point A to point B? Or sometimes it's in orbit, things move. So there might be something where you've got this image processing machine learning tool that for the commercial world that you could make a application for the Air Force. So that's what this commercial solution opening is there something from the commercial world that solves an Army need? And so this description, you see that it doesn't really talk a lot about any specific technology, but there are things they want to know, like who are your customers? How big is the market you serve? Because a lot of the emphasis on these is that the Army or the Air Force or whoever is not your only customer. So
yeah, exactly. And so it does go, it's initially, the initial thought a few years ago when these were kind of coming out, like, oh, this is great, they're investigator initiated, they might be easier. I actually think that these might be a wee bit harder, because you really do have to have already established that you're finding out the problem. You should always do that, right? But when the specific topics, Navy is really good at specific topics. And in fact, Navy kind of prides. They do have open because it is required now for one, but they'll put some constraints around it. But if a Navy puts out a specific topics because they want it, it's almost yours to lose if you're successful with a Navy topic, because the intention is that is going to transition. They want that, and you can start building those relationships with the Navy if they like your solution. Here, it is really on you to make sure that you're really establishing that traction, because you're presenting, hey, we think that you could use this. So that's why a lot of the presentation and what you articulate is why this addresses, why it's a problem for the Defense Department, and how you're going to get traction there.
yeah, and with these Air Force topics, typically your phase 1 is talking to a customer, gathering requirements, maybe doing some technology development, but a lot of it's customer discovery because you got to get the signed memorandum at the end of it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
I just want to throw in a process check. We're 317 right now.
Yeah, yeah.
I do not have anything on the back end, so I can go as long as people are interested. So
Well, we do set this up for about 2.5 hours too. So I actually wanted to see, do we want to break? Do you want to take a 5-minute walk around, check your email, bio break? We can do that as well. Before we start digging into components of proposals and things like that. Why don't we, I am. I'm gonna say viewer. Are people there? How about we do that, guys? 5-minute break? We're gonna take a 5-minute break. And we will be back here at, sounds good, 10:04. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for the responsiveness. So hey, 3:23, let's, Mountain Time. Let's hit back. How's that sound, Ed?
it works.
Perfect. See you back there. half a minute more. I'm kicking myself for accidentally. I had all these tabs open, so we'll, if there's any more tabs, we'll look ahead. To open. Hey folks, welcome back. We're gonna go ahead and pick up. Hopefully that was a long enough bio break and time for people to check in on things. So again, I mean, I do see there's a few of my colleagues from the FAST team too. So I want to make sure at the end we'll kind of give you guys some time to say hey as well, because we're reaching across the nation here today. But definitely post any questions that you might have for this. But let's go ahead and pick up. We looked at the Air Force topics and where we can do. We're going to talk about how we can dig in, but open topics are here to stay, right? And they're Yep.
Yeah, so with the open topics, you know, as Ann said, the Air Force kind of did the first iteration of these and kind of refined it. They've actually started them, I believe it was 2019.
Yeah.
And, you know, other agencies kind of did it. And then in the last reauthorization, there was a mandate that everybody has to do open topics. So you can see, and I just grabbed, these are just screen grabs, so the links aren't live in these, but you can see there's an Army topic from 2024 on artificial intelligence. There's a Navy topic from 24 that's, you know, advanced robotic, and this is just a sampling.
Yeah.
SOCOM, Special Operations Command, was looking for precision timing. So what they were looking for is a lot of people use GPS also for timing, not just positioning. And how do you do that in a contested environment where someone may be blocking or spoofing GPS? OSD is the Office of the Secretary of Defense, so they were looking for generative AI, so think Chat GPT kind of stuff. Space Defense Agency was looking for some help for the warfighter to, it was based on a space-based architecture. So it could be satellite imagery, could be GPS, could be satellite comms. So CBD is it's not the cool stuff you think it is. It's chemical, biological, and you know other types of weapons, radiological weapons. So they're looking for you know some advanced sensing capabilities using quantum technologies.
Yeah.
MDA, Missile Defense Agency, they're doing a lot of stuff with hypersonics. So they're worried about material science. What happens, you know, to your wing edge when it heats up or things like that. Defense Threat Reduction Agency, that's what DTRA is. So they were looking for trying to put some gaming around some of the training that they do for the military personnel who staff those types of positions. Gamification has become a big thing in a lot of the control systems, because if you look at the new recruits coming in, gaming has been a large part of their life, as opposed to me that's at the opposite end of the spectrum where I still remember, you know, pinball machines. So Defense Health Agency is another one that's out there.
A long time ago, I worked at Nintendo, so gaming.
You know, Defense Health Agency, we talked about, you know, that there are health topics. This is burn wounds, you know, and this is a direct to phase 2 topic. So this is one where, you know, what they're hoping is that you've already got a technology you're using in probably a civilian, you know, could be a first responder kind of thing, could be an ER, but is there something there that they can deploy in the battlefield that will meet the requirements that they have for a less controlled environment where you're going to be dealing, you know, triaging people with injuries. So this is the kind of stuff that shows up as open topics. I didn't grab one from every single agency, but this is just kind of a representative sampling of the kind of stuff that may be in the DoD, and you can see that most of these were the recent, you know, 24.3 or 24.4 kind of things, but I would expect to see some open topics in the December release. I would be surprised if they were not there.
I do too. And folks, one thing that we want to get, maybe a reason why would we go through, why are we showing you all of these different ones? If you notice, if you recall that the Air Force, Space Force open topics, they will have really kind of the commercial solutions offerings were like almost anything under the sky in a sense, right? Make sure that you have the defense. And they also have some kind of focused ones. But what I am seeing, and this is, I'll say, this is my editorial, evaluation is with the requirement that to have open topics. They're open. They want you to kind of pitch them an idea, but they're giving you that box of what they want to see it in. It's not just anything. It's something related to quantum sensing, material science for high power directed energy systems, for example, right? So in a sense, it's they're trying to make sure that they're channeling you to their mission needs. And that's not a bad thing, right? If you
Yeah.
want to transition and you want to be responsive to them, you actually really want to still continue to make sure. And that really is ultimately what you're either phase 1 or even in a direct to phase 2. A key component of your job is to make sure that your technology meets the requirements of those programs, whether it's ruggedness or specific, things that are in contested environments where in the civilian market, you don't need to worry about that, right? So that's, that's the thing that I see at is not just everything under the sky, like the original Air Force ones. It's now they're going to a little bit more focused there.
Yeah, I would say that we've termed the classic topics, the military is defining the solution, but the open topics, I think they're defining the problem. And
Yeah,
they're looking for you to be innovative in how you might solve it.
great. Yeah, great way to say it. Thanks. I kind of brought this at, looking at that very first example that we used of the large language model. That's a currently active topic in pre-release from the Army. Let's suppose you wanted to go after this. What would I do next? I would go in and dig into the Army's page as we showed and try to learn as much as we can about what they're doing, do they have any additional descriptions in there? And then what are the other resources that the SBIR program under the Army has provided for potential applicants? That's another thing that we are here to coach you, but we use this as well. Let's leverage what they're doing. Let's not recreate the wheel, especially when it's coming direct from the source. What are the types of things that can really help you to be as successful? These are just a couple of screenshots from there.
One thing that shows up on these pages oftentimes is there might be a technology roadmap. It's certainly the case on the NASA website that one of the things you'll find is, here's where we think everything's going. And so being able to understand what their end goal is and understanding the terminology they talk about their technologies in can help you write a better proposal.
And the Army's program in particular, they all are. I mean, they really are, again, they are here they hope that you are successful. And once you're kind of in there, make sure that you're tapping into the resources that they have. They have people who can help answer questions for you and guide you through this process a little bit more as well. So this shows you like different program officers, executive offices that you may find out that are looking for this type of thing. In the Google Drive that I'll share, and you'll see it in the links in here a bit later. We have kind of another resource. It's a snapshot in time. I can't verify that everything is completely accurate, but it has a list that Steve Blank and others have compiled out of Sanford of all the program offices across the DoD components. Those are good things to take a look to at as well. And so we've talked about, not just hinted, we have said you should talk if a technical point of contact is published. Tell us, Ed, how best should we approach talking with the technical point of contact? What types of questions should we ask about this?
Yeah, so, and I think maybe for a previous workshop, we may have even done a template email, but
We did, yeah.
but the basic premise is you're going to approach them and say, here's how I understand the topic. This is the way I interpret it. This is what I want to propose that I think will solve the problem. What do you think? You're looking for feedback. is what you're thinking fit with the framework they're kind of understanding? And based on that, they may give you some guidance on, and that can help you a lot if this is your first time into the DoD. You know, it's like in the civilian world, we use it to do this. And, you know, so doing anything that can help educate them on how your technology solves a problem and getting some guidance on how well it matches the particular problem set or definition that they're putting out there for the topic.
And I would say, you know, be broad too, folks, when, you know, just had a question kind of coming up about, you know, well, which component may have this, maybe looking at it. You may find, you know, obviously Chem Biodefense or Defense Health Agency. You could maybe, if it's health related, maybe Defense Health Agency. But the Air Force sometimes in terms of AFWorks, or if they may have specific topics, or the Army may have specific topics. But you want to look at the overarching mission of that particular component, and if you're responding to some type of open topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, and if I was kind of multitasking here, kind of responding here a bit to a question that came through. If this is an open topic and there's technical points of contacts that are listed, how helpful are they? Could you address that? They often don't. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing is like the Air Force for their open topic does not put any TPOCs in. So there's
Yeah.
you can look for people within AFWorks or SpaceWorks because they're the ones who sponsor those topics. So sometimes that's a method. For the other branches, because it's newer to them, I can't say definitively who does and does not have technical points of contact. If there's one there, always ask. If there's not one there, if you can figure out, again, the who might be, you know, is it someone at the Army Natick lab? Is it someone at a Space Force lab like the Air Force Base in LA? Is it, you know, if you can kind of guess where it is, you might be able to go to the website for that particular command or the program executive officers that are in that Steve Blank document. I've even used LinkedIn. I had a client that was doing pilot training software, and in particular looking for all the helicopter pilots. And it turns out every Army helicopter pilot goes through what used to be Fort Rucker, and they renamed it to Fort, I think it's pronounced Novacell, and it's in Alabama. And I went and I scoured all the pages there, and then I started going into LinkedIn, and I just started looking for people that their company was the Army. And I looked for things like helicopter and aviation and training and instruction. And I found people and I started conversations about this particular technology. So anything you can do to try and get to a conversation with someone who's a subject matter expert, is always helpful. If you do all that hard work, get credit for it. When you write your commercialization plan, or when you're writing about, you know, why you're doing the technology that way, it's from conversations with XYZ command at whatever the base is, because you did the hard work. So in your proposal, you know, say, I did customer discovery with who I think the customer is, and this is the feedback I got. So I think that raises the perception of how closely you're tracking what the customer problem is by doing the customer discovery. So it's a lot of work. Get credit for it.
Yeah, yeah. And it really is, you know, keeping it, it's harder with those open topics like, well, what do they want? How do I define my statement of work? It is for you to decide what will advance it to transitioning into the DoD. That's really how you're going to think about what are the technical, what's the technical scope of work that will help me get to a product that can transition. So any questions, those are the types of questions that you'll want to think about. So yeah, but definitely for a specific topic, talk to that technical point of contact. Yeah. Definitely, absolutely. And so here, what we want to do right now is kind of transition to, okay, great, Anne, we've talked a lot about this. We spent a lot of time talking about the DoD programs. What do we do? Now, we're not doing a full proposal lab here, but more than just an introduction to the DoD SBIR programs, I thought we would take an opportunity to extend the length of this, our presentations, to really kind of maybe then dig into how can you really tackle being responsive to these. So we'll start here, the pieces of the proposal. You'll have different page counts, different formats, but you are going to have to address all of these sections. You'll notice it. We're going to tell you, go look at those instructions for different components and the DoD BAA and a DHA or an AFWORKS. They still ask you to include something related to all of these components.
Yeah, one of the things that's a little tricky is you're going to notice that it's going to ask you what's your proposal number, and you don't get to pick your number. So the first thing you do is you in general, you put some kind of abstract into that DSIP, that defense portal. And when you do that, it asks you questions like, well, what topic are you responding to? So you're going to it's going to generate a proposal number that's usually that topic number dash like 0047 or something like that. So it's going to tell you what your topic number is, and you need to track that because it usually needs to be in the header or footer of pretty much every document you're going to submit. Right.
I may go offline later here, guys, or we'll kind of do some slides. I'll let Ed talk about some slides, and then I'll log in. I realized again, because I stupidly closed my browser, I'm not logged in again. I wanted to show you a little bit kind of that interface, but that really is it. Get into DSIP. In fact, I said that earlier in the slides, in the registrations. Regardless of agency, one of the biggest problems that I see too is that last minute people say, hey, I've got everything ready. It's 3 days until a submission, but they haven't really figured out and navigated the proposal submission form for that particular agency. And DSIP is they're trying to be as straightforward as possible, but you still have to kind of get in there and figure out how to submit everything. So make sure that you get in there and play around with the proposal submission form.
And we'll get to it when we talk about it in more detail, but volume 6, you actually have to take a little training class, and you have to cut and paste your certificate into a field to say, yes, I've done the training. So that's the one that catches people. It's like, yeah, it's already to hit submit. And it's like, oh, I had to still do the training. It's not like a 30-second training. So
it's not. I've taken that training before too. So just silly me, I wanted to see what it was like. So one of the things when we're supporting our clients, folks, we can help you kind of with all of these little administrative stuff, to the best of our ability for sure, right? But the core components that we're going to be helping you with is really that, does your statement, your technical volume, your technical proposal, is it responsive? Are you hitting the mark? Are you telling your story right? Are you addressing what they want you to address? And often the budget too, that's some things that I can do, and some of my other consultants, we can kind of help make sure that that's compliant as best as possible. And one thing that I will say, we'll talk about the budget. We're going to talk about the technical volume now. When we get to the budget typically is not a high criteria element. If you remember, I said intellectual merits, your impact, and your company and team. Those are the primary things that they're going to select you for. But definitely at award negotiation, that's when your budget, they're going to run through it in a fine-tooth comb. So you can't just throw those numbers together. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But here, these are the elements for sure. Every single technical volume, regardless of the format, right, Ed? They're going to have you touch on everything.
Yeah, they do. And what I always tell people, the first 5 bullets you see there, this is a research proposal. Those 5 bullets should be about 60% of whatever your page count is. So if you got 10 pages, it's going to take you 6 pages to talk about the problem. your objectives and your statement of work are what you're proposing. Related work, what's your background? You know, how have you, why are you in this space? And then the relationship to future research or research and development is kind of what's going to happen in phase 2. You know, what does this set the stage for? And the thing, when you think about what it's going to take to get from your idea to an actual something that can be deployed for the DoD, what are your elements of technical risk? Because those are probably the things you want to de-risk in your phase 1 or mitigate risk or lower risk. So if you hinge on a couple key technical points, that's the experimentation you want to kind of get out of the way in phase 1 so that phase 2 you can build on it.
So some of the things that I talk about too, that things that are going to help you with that, to articulate that, is do some of your pre-planning, right? You know, you want to kind of come up with smart objectives, things that are measurable. It'll come to your budget as well. If you can design your statement of work in a way that you have specific milestones and you have a contract that is on progress payments, you can say, hey, I've hit milestone 1, you can pay me now. I've hit milestone 2, you can pay me now. So think about that also when you're preparing your technical proposal here. This is a tool that's up in the website as well. And here's the link to the Google Drive. Again, that's open for all of you, should be able to access that and view, and then hence download anything that you see of value in there. I'll keep that open for another week or so you guys can retrieve anything there. But do think about, you know, what tasks you need to do to accomplish those objectives, who on your team you want to do. We'll see an example later of maybe how you might lay this out in a Gantt chart or other table for them. Where is it? Again, that goes to, can you execute on this? It's a great idea, but if you have no facilities and you have a bunch of chemical, you know, materials processing that you need to do, you better have a lab or be able to access a lab and facilities for that. And then really, again, do support what you're doing. And maybe you can talk to this a little bit more. Certainly with NSF and NIH, I'm going to say, if you do not have citations and you have not provided them foundational reasons for why your approach is sound, you're crazy not to do that. And DoD, you should still do this. This is a scientific proposal. You should still support why your approach is scientifically sound with citations as relevant.
I mean, the fact they put citations in the solicitation kind of speaks to, you probably need equivalent level citations in your proposal that says, you know, reference, you know, maybe a paper you worked on, maybe a professor you worked with, maybe something you just know from being in the industry. But and certainly when you do your commercialization plan, you're going to have citations for market size and things like that. Don't make those numbers up. You have to, you know, someone who follows the industry says it's this big, growing this fast. This is what's driving it. So those are important things to include.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and we can help support some of that too as well. We can, or your local FAST area, as part of MSU, I have access to PitchBook. You know, I don't have a lot of market research anymore things, but I have some other alternative types of market research reporting that I have access to through OmniSync and things like that. One thing about this kind of process, this would not be something that you would include. This is sort of like your outline, your scratch work. But this really ties, if you can see how this ties to, hey, I'm defining my statement of work. Here are the resources I need to accomplish this. Guess what that does? It helps you define your budget. So this is a really good bridge between the two pieces of that. Formats, we have talked a little bit about this, but it's going to be in the instructions. Have we said? You should read the instructions. They're going to be different. I'm really careful to catch myself too, because I'm like, oh, I saw this Navy topic and they need this, but then here's a different topic or a different Navy topic, and they want a different thing, you know, a different format too. So even within components, they can be asking for different types of content that they want you to provide.
Yeah, and the nice thing with the Navy is the Navy has all these templates. They only work for the Navy. So don't grab a Navy template and use it for the Army, because it might be 90%, but you can get thrown out for the 10% it's not. So what I always tell people, if a template is not available, best practice is, I happen to use Word, I create a Word document. Everything that's a bullet in the technical volume, I create as a section head in Word. And whatever the required content is, I hang off of that header as a comment, and I don't delete the comment until I've answered every required element that's in that section.
Yep. And I've done that, folks. We can show you different examples of that. And I regularly do that for our clients who are doing things like this. But I'll show you kind of an example of what we're talking about here too. I'm going to just pull this one out, pull this back in. Let's go ahead and see if we look at that large language model 1. I'm going to look at the DoD and then the Army. Here are the instructions. We didn't pull this up before. I'm going to make that a little bit larger. What are they asking for in the actual application process and what they want to see? Proposal preparation instructions. I'm going to navigate right there. And here they're going to tell you what they want in their technical volume. Look what they said. They don't have it here. Air Force or others will have it here. They're going to say, oh, go back to the DoD instructions. So I'll go there. But what I have to do is comply with putting everything in that the DoD instructions say, but I'm limited to 5 pages. Does that make sense? So let's show. Okay, so let's go back to these parent instructions. Let me make that bigger for you as well. And I'm going to find the proposal preparation instructions, introduction to do. Oh, sorry, they're not live links here. Let's go down to page.
Oh. Page 12 is where you want to get to.
Thank you. There, phase 1 proposal instructions, your cover sheet. That is actually a form in DSIP that you'll have there. Here's what you want to do in your technical volume. You want to include, well, what we said there, all of these elements in 5 pages. Another component or another topic may say you have 10 pages or, such and such pages. So you have to do this. And as Ed alluded to before, don't get creative here. That does not make you stand out, actually. Your content, clean presentation for sure, but being original is not what's going to help make you stand out. It's just going to irritate the reviewers because
you don't stand out in a good way.
Pardon?
You don't stand out in a good way.
Yeah, you don't stand out in a good way, right? So this is what you would do. So that's what we're kind of talking about in terms of that aspect there. So we will get back to the slideshow. So those are the kind of the formats. And the slide decks, again, they'll have the same thing. In the instructions, they'll say slide, you have up to 10 slides, for example, or up to 15 slides, for example, and they want, these 8 to 10 topics covered in it. So that may mean a couple of them, you might have a couple of slides to be able to relate to things. These are not really, really pretty presentations and where you just put an image on there and you talk, because you're not going to be talking to them. They're reading these. So they should be verbose. They should be, really to the point, and do include pictures of your product or things like that as relevant, but don't include a whole lot of white space if you have an opportunity to say something more in there. But do heed the font sizes, even in the presentations, the PowerPoint presentations, they'll have requirements for font sizes and things like that. So these are commercialization strategy is part of that technical volume too.
It is, although for a lot of the ones that use slides, they have you do your commercialization strategy in slides. But
Yeah.
I don't think they're doing you a favor, but they do that. But the big thing is you have to justify there's a market, that you understand the market so you can name a competitor, you can kind of tell them what the current state of the art is. Whenever you name a competitor or state of the art, differentiate. This is the competitor. This is why we're better. This is what they're doing today. This is why we're better. You have to talk about how you're going to scale a business. And when you start to get to phase twos, they actually want revenue projections and things like number of units you're going to sell and cost of goods. I mean, a lot of things. So you got to, if you've written a business plan, you may have a lot of these pieces already. But that's kind of what they're asking for, is a mini business plan of, are you going to be successful in once the research money runs out? Talking to your customers. I can't stress enough how customer discovery, or if you're going to have an indirect channel, like if you have to partner with an L3Harris, have a partner strategy. You're going to talk to these people. You're going to, you know what the royalty rate is for your market. You know, this type of technology is a 5% royalty or 10%. How are you going to grow? You need, one of the questions that asked a lot in phase twos is, are you going to need external funding to grow? Like if you can build 10 in your lab, great. Can you build 1,000 a month? Well, you may need a bank loan to build a manufacturing line, or you may need investor money. So thinking about all those things, when you write, even when you write your phase two, you should understand what the implications are in your phase, or when you write your phase one, knowing what you need in phase two and knowing what you're going to need in phase three. I always tell people there's 3 lenses. So your phase one lens is really sharp and clear, and you can give a lot of detail. Your phase two lens, you can probably talk about it in a paragraph or 2. Your phase 3 lens is probably just a couple sentences, but you've got a progression of your technology roadmap that you can talk about through all 3 of those phases.
And one of the things, those financial projections, they're not necessarily easy to come up with, but I do think that it's a really good exercise as well. Certainly, especially at this phase 2 standpoint, and question.
And the thing I'll tell you about financial projections, as a reviewer, the first thing I know about every financial projection is it's wrong.
Yeah.
But if you give me a detail of, you know, like, it's not a DoD example, but if you told me that you had a technology that was going to be used by orthopedic surgeons, and you went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and you found out there were 38,000 orthopedic surgeons in the United States, and you think your price point is $5,000, I see a lot of business process in that. And I know that 1 or 2 of your assumptions isn't exactly right, but I see enough detail that when you realize it's not exactly right, you can adjust and still have a successful business. If you tell me it's a $20 billion market, you're going to capture 10%, you're going to be a $2 billion company, that math's too fuzzy for me. I don't have any confidence that when reality tells you something different than you assumed, that you're going to be able to pivot and still succeed.
Right, exactly. Favorite, not really, the cost volume. This is, again, I just told you, hey, the budget is typically not what's going to be included, but they will look at it. They are going to say, is this statement of work, are you truly able to do this for, you know, whatever the cap is, 280 to 230, whatever you actually put in as your budget there. Does it mesh? Are your direct costs, are your labor costs, are your overhead, are your materials and supplies all compliant and allowable? So I do a once or twice a year cost proposal workshop with one of our other consultants, Jim Greenwood, specifically because when I first started supporting clients, I would joke about like, if I got a call, I'm like, please don't be a budget question. Please don't be a budget question, because I just didn't know enough about it, you know? And so I said, I got to change that. So I can help you guys with a little bit of clarifying the budgets. I am not an accountant, but we can definitely guide this guide you through this. But regardless of agency, you're going to have direct costs plus your indirect costs. That's your overhead and your fringe and your G&A, and you're going to have a profit or fee. And I'm going to say right now, anybody that I support does not take a fee. That is allowed by the SBIR policy directive. And that is money that can be set aside in your budget to be used for anything. It does not have to comply with the FAR allowable or unallowable costs. It is considered profit to your business. You can go throw a party in Aruba and buy everybody alcohol with that money if you want to. It is intended to be, because you're a small business, you should be building in profit. More than likely, what it's going to do is cover changes in the costs that you didn't realize are happening, or you need to pay a consultant another element of consulting, or you want to apply that towards buying a huge piece of capital equipment or like buying some property that you need for your business, things like that. You can use it
or going to a trade show.
Going to trade shows, things like that, that may be outside of the travel. So what I'm going to say, I am going to use a little bit of a screenshot here. Sorry, guys, I wasn't able to log into DSIP. I don't know if you have a login right now. I was going to maybe go through that, but again, I want to emphasize, get into getting familiar with the proposal submission platform. Here were a couple of screenshots, actually just kind of from their job and from their help and learning and support templates that they have in the DSIP portal. And then I'm also going to show you, you have access in that drive that I shared with you. A very simple, you have one version that's a Navy direct or a phase 2 spreadsheet that has a lot of information, which you should learn how to do if you're going to be doing DoD contracting. But if this is your first time doing SBIR with DoD, or you're just going for a phase 1, I have a simple budget calculator that can be very, very helpful for you to calculate, crunch all the numbers ahead of time. Then when you go to the portal, and here are some snapshots of a general kind of specific areas that you're allowed, then you can actually then put the number in, add your supporting documentation in the text box to justify why that is, because you'll go through all the process of putting in your labor rates, telling them what type of person the PI is. Do they have a PhD? Are they a mechanical engineer or a material science senior, etc.? You'll put a lot of that detail in there. And that's the element where right now, or when it comes to looking at the technical proposal, they're going to say, oh, we like this. But when it comes to award negotiation, they're going to say, okay, this person's a PhD, but you're saying that they're $250 an hour. However, our GSA for that equivalent position would only be 122. Tell us how you're going to justify that. Those are the types of things that we want you to be prepared for right now, even though you're just like, I'm just trying to get this proposal in. Do the work now to just, crunch all the numbers, make sure that your technical scope and your direct costs, your travel, if there's any travel to do that's required for your project, or any other direct cost or any sub-awards are really clearly defined. Because as you can kind of see from those screenshots, I'm pointing over here to my screen, it doesn't make sense when you go into DSIP. It's not really completely obvious what I'm supposed to put where, but if you've crunched your numbers ahead of time and then you go to that, oh, I understand. Another thing that I will help you, if you see here, we can help you kind of for yourself, for your company, is look at how do I come up with, you could do just a single pool. I'm just going to do a single indirect cost rate, and it allows you to do that. Or you can break up your indirect, and those indirect costs are costs that are associated across projects just to run your business. That's fringe and wages. You can maybe add those as loaded costs to your direct labor costs. But there's general and administrative. That's bid and proposal for other things. That's the rent for your building. Rent is not something that is considered a direct cost. Things like that. So we can help you kind of make sure that those things are compliant as well. And then, making sure that you have justifications for all the materials and things like that that you have that are required in order to execute your project. Any thoughts on that?
No,
Okay. Here, this is the volume 4. Do they need to do this? When do they need to do this one?
so the company commercialization report, if you've never had an SBIR, your commercialization report is empty, more or less. But you still have to fill out the form. The form will tell you it's empty. But what happens eventually is if you get a number of phase 2s, they look at the ratio of your phase 2 award amounts to the amount of commercial revenue you've generated. And they like to see that you have a positive return on investment. So this is a report that I always tell people you should probably update it quarterly. If you've had phase 2s, you always try to attribute revenue from a commercial sale back to the original project. And that's what goes into this report. And eventually, I don't know if they still have it, but it used to be the Commercialization Achievement Index was what DoD called it.
And it is related to just the technology that was developed with SBIR folks. So
Right.
they're not saying, hey, okay, tell us all of your, because you're like, hey, I'm a private company, I'm not going to do that. This is related to technology that was developed with SBIR. This is just a way for them, and please do this. This helps to support future reauthorization. In fact, next year is another kind of reauthorization time period, I think, for things. You want to make sure this helps give the SBA and the agencies data on, hey, is there a good ROI? Are these investment dollars helping companies to then eventually commercialize based on technology that was funded with SBIR funding? But again, if it's your first time, it's you fill out the form, but you will not have any data. It's not your other company sales. It's related to any projects, regardless of agency that you funded with SBIR. And I'll say here, guys, don't worry. We've done here at TechLink economic impact analysis of the DoD SBIR program in general, 22-to-1 in terms of dollars that have been invested in DoD projects. However, we also noted that from first award until commercialization, it's about 8 years on average. So they're not expecting that if it's year 3 after your phase 1 award that you are generating big bucks. Hope you do. Love it if you do, but don't worry if that's not immediately there. Supporting documents. This is something not to miss. There are things that you'll want to include here. Any letters of support. And this is, there are a couple of agencies that don't allow letters of support. NASA does not allow letters of support on phase 1. NSF is not allowing letters of support. Letters of support means, hey, we're a potential customer or a potential commercial partner, and we really think this is a great deal. We're looking forward to, if this is successful, perhaps buying this product, right? Letters of support from people in the Department of Defense that are expressing interest in that. Those are elements here. Letters of commitment are letters from, if you do have a subcontract with a university, for example, you'll want, or other subcontractors that are germane to what you're proposing in your project scope. Those are like another type of flavor of letter. It's a letter of commitment confirming, and that's really just to say, hey, we're going to do this on the project. Here are our rates, and then they'll have some other things that are required there. Technical data rights assertion, and we haven't really talked about it. Again, I really want to emphasize too that it even goes back a little bit to this commercialization thing. Hey, we can push a tutorial out to you as well. If you have proprietary data that is developed with SBIR, that you're not going to publish or patent immediately. That, marking that technical data is the way you are able to assert that non-disclosure, that SBIR data rights. If you don't, they're going to assume that it's not covered by non-disclosure. So you can't mark your whole entire proposal as proprietary. You have to be selective on those elements. Commercial sales activities, that certainly is something that could be marked as proprietary, but it's really those technical elements of your proposal that you want to keep confidential from others outside of the government. So while we're not going in deep here, I do want to make sure that you guys are paying attention to that and taking a look at that element.
Yeah, and the way that comes up is what gets published in general, like on the SBIR.gov website, is just what's in your abstract. So don't put anything proprietary in your abstract. But if someone files a Freedom of Information Act request, like say someone's disputing your award and they want to say, well, we want to read the proposal. Anything that's in there that you've marked proprietary would be redacted before they would service that Freedom of Information Act request. So, if there are things like who your customers are, what your revenue is, what your bank lines are, all those kind of, in particular, things that are key to your technology that are not already published as patents, those things you want to make sure are marked so that if anybody ever does request your proposal, that they're redacted.
And in the instruction, folks, they'll have the wording, the legend that you would include, and the method for how you will describe the method for how you will mark it in your proposal, whether it's a bar in the margin, or you've highlighted or done something, or put a box around something. You'll mark it in a certain way so that they know which areas should be redacted.
Yeah, two things to know about this. One is it's not a catch-all for anything you want to dump in, so don't just throw stuff in here. And like for the last Army one, sometimes when they have you do a written volume in a slide deck, they say, well, combine it into a single PDF. The Army one said, you're going to submit the prose, the written part, as your volume 2, but you're going to put your deck into other in volume 5. So pay attention to the directions.
Yeah. Well, and I know it can be confusing too. And I'm not going to say any names here, but it was a different agency, but it was like, honest mistake. Like, well, I didn't know where to put something, so I put it here, and they got flagged. And it's just because they're like, hey, the agency wasn't expecting something to be in this certain bucket. So that's where you just kind of want to make sure that you're going through. And then sometimes that's where ask someone, I got this thing, they want me to put it, where should I put this? And we can sometimes help you navigate. Oh, it should be put here. And if they only accept one document, that means, hey, put this into a PDF and combine the documents into one document so you can upload it. Sometimes those are the weird things that we can't really tell you until you go experience it. But it is another reminder that by doing this early, if you run into these weird things that like, hey, where does this go? If you only have 15 minutes to get everything submitted, that's not going to happen. So try to make sure that you're getting everything into the system, and you can start with putting things up into the system from day one, right? So you can, if you have something that's done and complete, and then before you hit submit, you can do your final compliance check and make sure that everything is the version that you want to be loaded in there, and everything's complete. This is the one Ed was talking about. Lots of people miss this. And so I'm trying to make sure that we remind people about this as well when they're doing DoD, like, don't wait for this, because I talk about the technical volume and the budget, we do that, but then this is something that needs to be completed prior to submission. And this is days, if not weeks before. You just need to confirm that you've done it. And this is, again, this is another way that we're helping our legislature and folks know that there is, we're protecting taxpayer money, right? That they're protecting taxpayer money and ensuring that this money is not wasted. We don't have fraudulent people saying that they're going to do something and then spending the money in a different way. This is pretty new too.
This is one DoD is really pushed on. They want to make sure that they know who any foreign employees, subcontractors, the one that catches people is investors. If you've taken outside investment, and sometimes you don't know if you've taken it from, I would say Silicon Valley Bank, but that's not a great one to talk about. But, there may be investors in that fund. What they're worried about is if you've got an investor and you have to give a briefing to your investor, you may accidentally export something. It's called a deemed export. If you talk about something that's export controlled to a foreign national, you've just exported.
Yeah.
And the penalties can be anywhere from a slap on the wrist to a big fine to you get to wear an orange jumpsuit and go to jail. So you want to make sure that you understand who your owners are, who your employees are, and if you've taken outside investment, who your investors are. And there's different classes of non-American citizens. I mean, someone on a green card is different than someone on a visa is different than I'm going to outsource software development to India. So you have to have all that stuff. And by the way, all SBIR work has to be done in the United States. So that's an important thing. And Canada is not part of the United States.
Right, yeah.
NAFTA doesn't cover.
Right. Yeah. So, if your PI or someone on your team is, not a permanent resident or not a US citizen, you'll want to identify that. You want to let them know.
And the thing with DoD is a lot of time in phase 2, that ITAR restriction, and ITAR is the International Treaty on Arms and whatever the R stands for.
Traffic and arms regulations.
But the big thing is there's certain things that, if they can be weaponized, there are very specific steps before you disclose it to a foreign national. So.
In fact, I've had folks when you look at the topic, we didn't really highlight that when we were looking at the topic descriptions, but if you see ITAR on that, think about it, because that is probably going to limit maybe the dual useness of it or your ability to export this. I would almost assume a lot of things with DoD, but if you're like maybe doing wound care, maybe they don't care if you export that to any other country in the world. But if you're doing sensor technologies, anything with respect to the weapons, etc., you can bet they're going to want to protect that from getting in other people's hands, especially if they're funding that.
In the way that you get caught a lot on that is if your subcontract is with the university, you don't know who the students are. And you have to make sure that when you get under contract, there's going to be all these, they call them flow downs, things that you are responsible for that by contract, your subcontractors are in export restrictions is one of those. So you're going to care whether everybody that's working on it with your university partner has the right citizenship classifications. So
yeah, we could probably do a whole conversation about just what to do in a subaward situation, what is required, but great point. Thank you. And guys, I know we're getting close to the end. I'm so happy that you've spent this afternoon with us. But let's we just have a handful just to kind of give you a next step. And I want to make sure that if you guys have specific questions, feel free to let me know. I know a couple of people have said, hey, well, I'll ping you offline and we'll talk with them later. But one of the things, again, depending on the topic, depending on the component, depending on the solicitation, all of these agencies are interested in you being successful. And there's a lot of different types of commercialization, I-Core at NIH, I-Core type likes of systems, Navy's, STP or mentor protege, things, industry days, etc. But one of the things that can be built into an SBIR proposal, again, budget wise, kind of we'll want to read the directions and how people are doing this, but it's really another set aside of money. It can't go to you, but it could go to a third party. It may be money that is allocated to a specific vendor that the component chooses, or you may select another qualified, kind of bespoke, tailored service provider that's really niche to your market, can really help you with your market. But the Army or the DoD or the agency will vet to confirm that they actually have the qualifications and that they would be right. But these are technical and business assistants. And on phase one, if it's allowed, so I'm going to say if it's allowed, we have to check the instructions. You can get up to $600 or $6,500 that you can have a third party provider do some work. And actually, I should let you talk more about that, Ed, because my program cannot do TABA because of under MSU. We're not it just doesn't, it won't work with the way we do things. Would love to do it, but I can't. But I always say, so there's no conflict of interest in my consultants doing that. So, great, I see a question. So Ed, talk a little bit about technical and business assistance and what.
Yeah, so a lot of times in phase one, it's a relatively small amount of money, but what the agencies realized was SBIR pays to mature your technology, and maturing your technology is only one part of doing a product. It's like, do you have market research? Do you have IP protection? There's a lot of things that you may use the money for. So some of the agencies actually have a preferred vendor, like the Army does stuff with FedTech. In general, for a phase one with a preferred provider, you're going to get a market research report. And that could be a very useful thing for you. But if you say, I really need to do a provisional patent, it's a couple $1,000s. You can't use SBIR money to do that. You can use your profit to do that, but you could say, I want to pick my own vendor, and it happens to be a patent attorney, and I want them to file a provisional patent. So 2,000 of that 6,500 is going to go for IP protection, for example. The 50,000 for phase two, you can do more things. It can still be market research. There's typically not preferred providers at phase two. You might be able to do a full patent, because a full patent is going to cost you $15,000, $20,000. So it's a lot of money. It could be you need to do a compliant accounting system so that you can now do business with the federal government. It could be you need to get your cybersecurity in order, because that's a big thing. And I can almost guarantee you, if you get a phase two from the DoD, you're going to get audited. They're going to audit your cybersecurity. They're going to audit your books, and they want to know that you're compliant. So those are things that you may consider as use of TABA funds. So it's above and beyond your award in most cases. Some agencies, so this one, you really need your magic decoder ring, and you got to read the instructions, because like for the Army, for phase one, it's on top of your award. Phase two, it comes out of your award. So if it's a $2 million award and you want 50,000 in TABA, you're just reduced how much technical work you can do. So, but it is very beneficial. It's money that they realize that you need to get to a product or to get to a commercial offering. It could be that you need to find a partner. So you're doing business development to find a partner. It could be to interact with a partner. You need a partner agreement. You need a mutual non-disclosure agreement. You need things. So it's things that you need to work in the marketplace. So it doesn't just have to be, I'm going to go to a trade show. It could be, I need things to protect me both document-wise, patent-wise, filing trademarks or copyrights. There's a lot of things that may be part of that. And there's a pretty good discussion of what can be used and what can't be used. And this is another thing that when you come down to, you get the award, you get into contracting, they may ask you to justify rates. They may ask you why you picked a particular vendor. So, but in general, it's going to have to happen if you choose your own vendors. They're going to have to give you a budget letter that says, this is who I am. This is why I'm uniquely qualified. These are the services I'm going to provide. This is the budget for those services. And as a result of these services, you're going to end up with a patent application. You're going to end up with a market research report. You're going to end up with, there has to be a deliverable that's defined for those fees. And it can just be, oftentimes it is a report. And DoD doesn't do it, but for NASA, they want to know, like, when I ever do a TABA letter for NASA, I have to include my letter of good standing from the state of Colorado that says, hey, I'm an American business and, I'm in good standing. I've done filed all the right paperwork and things like that. So, and they're going to have to be in SAM. So they're going to have a unique entity identifier. And that can be a problem because, like, with a patent attorney, the first time they do it, it's like, I'm not in SAM. I've never done this. But so they have the same thing. It's going to take them 3 weeks to get that number. So don't ask for the TABA letter the day before the proposal's due. But think about what moves your business forward best. And even if you choose to do the default provider, when they say, what you're going to do is you're going to have a kickoff meeting with that provider. Full disclosure, I also do work for Foresight Science and Technology. When you do that kickoff meeting, be very specific in what you want if you don't want a generic report. If you know who your customer is, it's like, go find me these people. Don't tell me that the market's this big. Find me 12 contacts that have the title, Chief Security Officer, because I'm doing cybersecurity stuff. So be specific and push them a little bit to give you more than the cookie cutter report.
A question that came through, Ed, was, can this be used for some type of subscription that my company can use for, GovTribe, for example? No, I don't believe that it can be. It is supposed to be third party, but tell me, I don't think you can buy something that you can.
I don't think you can buy a subscription. Like, if you want, if you have a vendor and they need to buy a market research report, those tend to be $4,000 or $5,000. You can have that person do that. One service I provide is I will actually go to an industry conference and interview people on your behalf. The beauty is, if everybody in your industry is in one city for 3 days, you can go in and actually get to a lot more people than if you blast emails and call people and things like that. So, the most recent one I did, I got to go to Las Vegas, of all places. Not that I'm a big fan of Las Vegas, but it happened to be a drone show. It was the Commercial UAV Expo, and I was interviewing potential partners for a company using TABA funds. So
yeah, and that's a really great use of those funds. It extends your capabilities. It helps you commercialize other things. I've heard in the life sciences regulatory compliance
yes. Yeah, if you're going to have to do an FDA filing, that can be a big thing. If you need to, we just talked about ITAR. If you need to figure out what your export classification is, you can use TABA money to do that, because there's one, it's EAR 99, which basically means there's a lot of other stuff like that gets exported, and I'm just like them. And then there's the ITAR things where you have to start.
Yeah.
You have to be very specific about what things you can talk about and what things you can't.
Yeah.
And whether you need a specific export license.
Oh, go ahead.
So those are things you can use TABA money for, determining your export classification.
Exactly. And I know there was another question, and we're going to take it offline because it's a really specific niche, but I'm going to copy it for you, Ed, and we'll talk about that maybe with that particular person attendee here. Because it's pretty specific. Folks, in the last couple of minutes, one is like, wait, I only have a few minutes to talk about finding your DoD, because we've talked throughout this project. How can, what are some of the first steps people can take? We say, find your defense stakeholder, find these people. If it's not an Air Force CSO where they're going to pay you for 3 months to actually try to find that person, what are some of the approaches that people can do? And
So
what-
one of the ones that's kind of interesting, you know, those TPOCs that you got,
Yeah,
look them up on LinkedIn.
yeah.
Where are they? Are they at Aberdeen Proving Ground? Well, maybe your customer's at Aberdeen Proving Ground.
Mhm.
Those are things you can do. I talked about the helicopter example. I found the fort in Alabama that every Army helicopter pilot goes through. Sometimes, you know, like the document that's referenced here, that program executive officer that was compiled by Steve Blank, even if the names have changed, chances are the office still lives where it lived. So if the office was in Huntsville and that person's not there, the new person's name's probably on the website. If it's not, go read the press releases on the website, because it's going to have an announcement of, we just welcome new commander, blah, 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 the XYZ command. And you know, if there are local events that happen, like Huntsville is because there's a lot of different military entities there. Sometimes there's local kind of trade shows, and sometimes showing up for those can be the right thing. Read your competitors' websites. Find out, you know, what press releases that they've done, what trade shows do they go to. You know, those are, you know, if they're having a booth at the Commercial UAV Expo, maybe you should just, you know, not necessarily have a booth, but you should go walk the floor at that show and see who's there and what kind of conversation. So this is where it's a very exhaustive process. And for technical founders who don't do this a lot, this is where you want to push on your TABA resource and say, go find me those people. Because what I do a lot of times is I have initial conversations, and then when I know so I've got the right person, then I get the founder involved, because you're pretty busy doing all the technical work for your SBIR. You don't have time to, you know, do some of these things. So see what resources you can leverage to find these people. And it's a lot of, you know, Sherlock Holmes kind of, how do I put the pieces together and find somebody?
I'm gonna add to that too, folks, guys. So if, for example, I'm gonna say from the Montana world, right? If you happen to be in photonics and quantum, and this is a little bit of focus. I'm actually on the board of the Montana Photonics and Quantum Alliance, and so I know this firsthand. Tap into alliance organizations in your state, because you may find that there's a partner company that's doing something in your area, and they already are doing defense contracting. Could you have them be a sub award, or could you possibly do a pilot with them, and they can then introduce you to defense contractors? There's a lot of different ways. Sales is sales. It's not easy. It's like a simple concept, get money in the door, but it is hard to do. So definitely just kind of take advantage of those types of opportunities. This resource isn't up in that driveway as well, up in that drive as well. But you know that I'd love to talk more about this, but we are getting at the end. We are down at the end. Folks, I'm so happy that you spent the afternoon with us. I want to let you know that you, for those of you in Montana, or if you're affiliated with TechLink, you've licensed DoD technology, I will always refer you to your local FAST team in your local state, because they're going to know what's going on. I mean, your state might have matching funds or other things I'm not aware of. I know a lot about Montana's resources, but I'm happy to help support, collaborate with other state FAST programs as well. But really, they're going to be the best people for you to turn to. But if you're in Montana, definitely you can reach out to me and we can get you started on things. Thank you. Here's our contact information, and definitely follow up with any questions, guys. If you know, as you kind of absorb this information, let me know how we can help, and have a great afternoon. Thanks so much.